Hello guys, it is me, the Tank, and next year, and today we'll be continuing with our series on Italian tanks. Today we're talking about the first Italian tank, or first Italian tank design, unless you count the Da Vinci tank, which I do not. And this would be the Ansaldo Armored Tortoise. So let's just get right into it with the statistics. It would weigh about 80 tons, which is actually pretty reserved for World War One. It would have actually round sloped armor, which is pretty interesting, with 50 millimeters through all of it, which, wow. In comparison, the A7V, which was a very heavy tank, had 30 millimeters, and the Mark IV had about 15, so yeah, wow. With the 200 horsepower engine, it would only be able to move about 1.25 to 2.50 miles an hour, and that's on flat terrain, so not a field of trenches with mortar holes everywhere, or the Alps of Italy, on flat terrain. So, yeah, this thing would not be able to go up hills very well. It would be armed with 10 machine guns and 12 flamethrowers. There would be 4 machine guns on either side, 1 on a forward and 1 on a backward turret. And then there would be 12 machine guns. Wait, no, sorry. And there would be 12 flamethrowers. There's a typo. There would probably be 4 on either side, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. Probably much lower in the vehicle to clear trenches and destroy any infantry. I'm guessing there would be 24 crew at the least, 1 for each weapon, and then a driver and a commander. Though honestly, there'd probably be multiple commanders or at least multiple drivers. Onto the physical layout, there's a 2x2 track configuration with 2 revolving top turrets back and forward, and then a top middle turret, which is unarmed but is for more of a lookout or command station. Once again, it has fully round or sloped armor, which is interesting. As for the tracks, I think the tracks are probably the most interesting thing about the vehicle. It was actually a really genius track system. It basically allowed the vehicle to move over various obstacles. Like, if you could see here, this is just on flat terrain, right? It looks normal. But then when it goes forward, only this one goes up, which is pretty damn smart, This goes down, like, it makes sense. Like, this is actually a really genius design. You can see here how it would get over a hole like this. And it actually reminds me a lot of the Christie suspension later. While it's sort of a suspension, but not a traditional one. It actually reminds me a lot of other suspensions later adopted that allowed them to move faster and clear vehicles. If this thing had a much smaller weight and was just smaller in scale, this suspension system would actually be really genius. Onto actual history of this vehicle. So in 1915, as we all know, Italy enters World War One on the Entente and faces the exact same problems as its Entente allies, Britain and France. They had a lot of trouble crossing broken, crater and trench-filled ground with enemy machine gun positions just slaughtering men. And just like them, they realized armored vehicles were the answer. So the design started in 1916 with Ansaldo Engineers, a company known for making cars, especially electric cars, and would make many vehicles later for the Italians, especially in military sense. The project was led by Gino Turinelli and was named the Testuggine Corazzata, or Armored Tortoise. I apologize for my Italian. I know it's not the best. Turinelli essentially came to the conclusion that this vehicle would require an evenly distributed mass and 4 tracks that each have their own engine. He thought this would allow the machine to cross obstacles 60 centimeters high, which, yeah, maybe not. Onto the final assessment of this vehicle. The tank has some really advanced concepts, especially the track system, but is held down by a bad chassis and hull. The track designs were really brilliant, especially for the time period. The Christie suspension, which reminds me of, came 2 decades later. However, the rest of the vehicle just suffers from World War One Landship system, which is essentially, let's make this vehicle as big as we can so it'll never be destroyed, and it can just destroy everything. The only problem is, first of all, once you lose that vehicle, it's a massive loss, and second of all, it's just too big and too slow. They just tried to fit too much into a single vehicle to be plausible, which is why even a prototype was never built. This stayed an on-paper concept for pretty obvious reasons. 24 weapons is just too much for a tank, 80 tons is too heavy, and 50 millimeters too thick, and 2 miles an hour is just too slow, even compared to the 5 that was the standard time. So in general, this tank had some great ideas, just bad in totality.